towards the sun, you feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive, and you don't have to be afraid of anything.
Welcome to the Bassline. Dr. Braun is one of the right docs of history. He has courageously spoken out against COVID crimes. He has examined the COVID event in its medical, psychological, and economic aspects. It is with great enthusiasm that I welcome to the Bassline the lucid and compelling Dr. Braun. How are you this afternoon, Dr. Braun?
Jeremiah, I'm doing great. Let me take this off. There's an echo here. There you go. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Okay, I'm doing very well as well. I'm looking forward to our conversation here. So I want to jump right into this, Dr. Braun. Well, first of all, you're from South Africa, and I have to say I absolutely love South Africa. I've been to South Africa 3 times, and I have so many fond memories of that country, and I would love to take my family there at some point. It's really a magical place where you come from. I saw the biggest rainbow that just seemed to stretch across the entire sky in Cape Town.
It is absolutely incredible there, and I can say that you know what, I'm still getting an echo on my side, so just let me unplug this and just use the phone right now. The thing about South Africa is just, it's just magic to go back to something that has such a long history of the world. And you just described the rainbow, but there's something else that goes along with those rainbows, which is those incredible thunderstorms. Nowhere else have I lived in the world that quite matches a late afternoon thunderstorm in South Africa.
Yeah, and the lychees there, the pineapples. I don't think I've ever come across a country with just sweeter fruit. And the floral arrangements, truly magical country. But I remember you saying in one of our X spaces that the experience of seeing the downfall of apartheid South Africa and all of the intense political dynamics there, to some extent prepared you for the COVID event. Could you explain that to us, how your experience as a South African sort of prepped you a little bit for this massive global event?
From my side, I'm really happy that you started with talking about how beautiful South Africa is, because there's obviously an incredibly ugly history, but I think it's important that people know, just like any other time period in the world, ugliness is always, it runs in parallel with absolute beauty. And so as much as I have memories of the darkest times of me living there, I also have incredibly fond memories, and it's an absolutely incredible story, one that I witnessed in terms of a country that goes from oppression, and the first time that I ever got to vote, there were people voting for the first time in their lives. Some of them were elderly folks. I remember there was even a woman that was brought in a wheelbarrow to come and vote. And these people, some of them couldn't even read and write. And so having a privilege at the end of their life to be able to vote and feel like they have a say and finally be recognized as a human being are truly just unforgettable memories for me. Jeremiah, I'm just trying to work out how I can get rid of the echo on my side.
Yeah, sorry about that. We've had that issue recently, so I don't know.
That's okay. Let's see what we can do. It wasn't there earlier. All right, let me try that. Anyway, I'm just trying to ignore it. What I wanted to... I think when I mentioned that in the space about South Africa sort of being a huge part of my awareness of this pandemic, the apartheid era, I mean, it profoundly prepared me for recognizing exactly what was occurring from 2020 onwards, and I actually credit a person who called me. I was a clinical psychologist in South Africa, and during my internship working in hospitals, one of my roles was being involved in the HIV and AIDS epidemic. And part of my responsibilities was to run group therapy for those that have been diagnosed with HIV, to be involved in the palliative care of those that were dying, and training people to do these HIV tests where people would get these results. And part of what I was doing is training others to basically do a pre-test and a post-test counseling session, because for some people, they left there with a positive HIV positive diagnosis and they couldn't have cared about it, and they went on with their lives and they did fine. And for others, they got this HIV positive result, and it felt like a death sentence for them. And we always had to talk to people to help them to ultimately not panic and leave there and suicide. And also what I didn't realize at the time, the sinister part about it, is that part of that counseling session was basically putting people onto treatments that were highly toxic, and the vaccine experiments that were running at the time and the antivirals that they were trying. Just like most people now, most of those interventions were actually the reason that people were dying, not the actual disease itself at all. And at the time, I actually didn't know that. But what I did know, and this person that called me right at the beginning of the pandemic, was somebody that reached out to me that said, "Hey, you were there for me during a tough time, and now we hear that there's going to be, there's an issue happening in the States with this novel virus, and I wanted to check in with you." And what she reminded me is that she was somebody that came to me and said, "I don't want to be in these group sessions anymore. They're too depressing. People are dying, and I want." This was a very young woman, and she said, "I want to live, and what else can I do besides all these toxic treatments?" And I said, "Well, let me go and do some research." And I came back to her and I said, "Look, this is not medical advice. You can check this with the medical team, but this is what I think is going to help you in terms of your wellness and supplements and getting your body ready and being able to fight disease." And I also said to her, "Look, if you're finding that the group sessions are bringing you down and are stressing you out, that's not going to help you to stay well. Why don't you skip the group sessions?" And she decided to do that, and she decided to just continue on with individual counseling when she needed it. And she called me, this is many, many years later, right at the start of the pandemic, and that was part of a great nudge that she gave me to not feel helpless and to start building a protocol and to start preparing people for the idea that you can think about disease trying to kill you, or you can think about the other side, which is that you should always be preparing your body for survivability. And what are some of the resources that you need when there's basically high levels of oxidative stress, which is at the heart of all disease. I'll take a pause there, just to if you've got any follow-up questions about that particular moment, or should I continue on telling you a little bit about the parallels?
You can go into the parallels a little bit more.
Yeah, so the parallels is where it gets really ugly, because basically I think of South Africa now during that time period of apartheid. I think of it as another outpost, sort of a satellite lab for those that ultimately control our planet. And I think about apartheid as obviously racial, but there's another side to all the systems that they put into place, and all the oppression was really about building a lab where they could see what systems could work, where a tiny minority of people that consider themselves elite can control the majority.
Right.
And so, everything that we're seeing playing out now on a global level is really similar to what I experienced during apartheid, and it makes me think of it as just as we experienced the pandemic as a live exercise. Well, apartheid was a live exercise that gears the planet towards being able to put these systems into place that are ultimately control and depopulation systems. In South Africa, saw the brutality up close. I mean, the 80s and the 90s were really rough. The 90s, and as people were trying to rise up and fight the oppression, there was just so much violence, and people were just like it's happening now in terms of people even being able to now being labeled as a terrorist for being anti-data center. The people that were rising up against oppression over there were ultimately labeled as terrorists. And so even when I was a child, around 6 or 7 years old, there was somebody that worked for my family that was declared an activist. And the police arrived, took this person away, and no trace of him ever again. His family never heard from him. We never were able to find him. And it was through things like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that those stories and those perpetrators of those crimes were able to actually come forward. Basically, they were absolved from criminal prosecution, and they told their stories of how they took these people away, how they assassinated them, and so ultimately, for me, the parallels are quite terrifying in terms of just watching it occur again now, but on a global scale. The other aspect of it is that as a clinical psychologist, I was very interested in the mind-body connection. I was very interested in how psychology and psychiatry can be weaponized. We're seeing that. We're seeing that actually quite terrifyingly in Canada, as one of the places that are now certifying people without even without any cause, and also gearing them towards the MAID program, in terms of the weaponization of psychological trauma and the weaponization of people having a hard time, and that has ultimately that's a turning point for us in humanity. I think we've always built societies on these ethical principles that we're here to help the vulnerable. We certainly weren't ever thinking as a global society that was ever acceptable to take the vulnerable and eliminate them or help themselves to suicide. And so those are again, once again, just frightening parallels. And then the last section that's deeply involved in this is that from a bioweapons standpoint, South Africa has a deep history in biowarfare development, and also most people think about biological weapons as just a way that people can be killed, but there's biological weapons are also used. I mean, the most basic one that people can think about is something like pepper spray, and that is used to control, right? That's used to break up crowds, that's used to stop protests. And so South Africa had a very nefarious biological program, and there was a biological development under something called Project Host. And there was the person that led that program was a doctor called Dr. Bassline, and he was developing drugs, that could hit the streets, that could control populations, similar to what we're seeing with fentanyl here. Those drugs were things like Mandrax and even drugs like MDMA, right, ecstasy and Molly. They were experimenting with that to see if they could actually control the population by keeping them in a state of euphoria rather than a state of rising up against oppression. And the other side to it is that part of that biological weapons development in South Africa was actually played out in terms of the HIV component attached to a super antigen, which is part of the SARS-CoV-2 sequence. That super bacteria that's it's an antibiotic resistant strain, and it ultimately gets paired with something that dampens inflammation, but also allows the rest of the sequence to cross the blood-brain barrier all of that work actually comes out of South Africa. I'm not sure how many people know that. Mostly people look towards Wuhan and North Carolina, but the biological development of SARS-CoV-2 as a sequence of the spike protein of it has been developed for decades in multiple sites around the world, and basically it was through the work of the DoD that put it all together and made it work as a functional spike protein that causes pathology, but is also a neurological tranquilizer, and it is ultimately the most sinister part about it is that it's also a kill switch, the ultimate control of a society. So that's I think there's so much to say about it, but the experience in South Africa on so many levels have shaped me who I am. You started with an introduction that I'm courageous. I think courage comes from a sense of awareness, and I think that from an early age, the things that I was aware of and the pain and suffering of others that I had empathy for, that's what ultimately shaped courage. I mean, courage is not only an act; it's a decision.
Oh yeah, you made a lot of important and profound points there. Are you on speakerphone by any chance, Dr. Braun?
I've tried both. I'm going to take myself off again.
Yeah, I was told by the engineer to tell you to turn off speakerphone. But you're doing a great job anyhow. So
thank you. I hope you still. Are you able to hear an echo on your side though?
Yeah, I can hear you well. Just make sure to speak directly into your microphone as well as possible. I can hear you, but just the clearer the better, of course. So you mentioned bioweapons and Wuhan and the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. And I am continually perplexed still by the nature of the COVID jabs as a bioweapon. There's so many questions I have about it. I undoubtedly have seen that these shots harm people to an extraordinary extent. There's many categories of evidence proving this by now. But what is your take on the COVID injections? What would you say about them to, let's say, a lay person who just is completely in the dark still, and they say, oh, well, the COVID vaccines, they saved a lot of lives and it was a miraculous invention of science. What would you try to convey to somebody if you had a few minutes to explain what's happening with these vaccines based on your research and knowledge?
Great question. So for me, I would start by saying that the spike protein itself is the issue, and if this was somebody that was a layperson and somebody that was actually being wonderfully curious and open to hearing more information, would say that what has been found is that the spike protein is a highly pathological toxin on its own. It is cardiotoxic, it is neurotoxic, it is cancer-causing, and it is also somewhat cytotoxic, meaning that it destroys cells and that it has the impact of cells around it. But the actual toxicity is driven by the spike protein creating a biological cascade that then leads to other situations in the body in terms of once the body is being triggered, the biological processes continue on. So in the best way that a layperson could actually visualize this is that a pregnancy or some other extreme event like a hibernation. And so if I explain to somebody that from the moment of conception that there was various biological changes that happened with a woman, that would be easy for them to understand, and they could realize that the egg only needed to be fertilized once for that entire biological process and cascade to keep going. There isn't repeated fertilization. And the spike protein is the same. I think this is one of the most misunderstood and undereducated part about the spike protein. It's not about spike protein persistence. It's about the persistence of cascading biological processes. Now, the part that most people layperson wouldn't want to accept or believe is that the actual sequence of the spike protein is taken from a female horseshoe bat, and that trigger that I'm talking about, and I compared it to a pregnancy and a hibernation, are actually the two processes that the spike protein is causing. One of which is a storage system for sperm, that the horseshoe bat actually has the mating takes place, and then the sperm is actually not used. The sperm is stored and can be stored for several months inside the female, kept in a viable state, and then only at the end of hibernation that the sperm actually gets released, and the copulatory plug, which is this solid mucus plug. It's very similar to the clots, the microclots, and to the calamari clots that are forming from the spike protein. All of that is a hibernation reproduction system that has been, through gain of function, that sequence that is not supposed to have any impact on the human body. We're not bats. That sequence is supposed to pass through us, have no effect. But when you give it gain of function, including the most important gain of function, which is the furin cleavage site, you allow the spike protein to be able to bind to ACE2 receptors and actually impact the human body and turn on the same system, the hibernation reproduction system, but in a human body that's actually not equipped to have those processes running. The other side that I would say to somebody around the vaccines is that the mRNA vaccines pose a particular issue in that the cells are hijacked themselves to make the spike protein rather than the spike protein being introduced. And we do know that for some people that the issue is that spike protein is being continually made. But it's not the fact that it's persistent. It's the fact that it hides out in biofilm and ultimately can trigger and can be triggered when the set of circumstances become viable for that spike protein to basically start replicating again, and for the body not to be able to clear it. And then once that spike protein is being made, then it can trigger the entire biological system again, and that's ultimately what we call COVID. Now, COVID wasn't a new disease. COVID was already discovered in 2012, and the first group of people that had COVID, as we know it in the world, were 6 workers that went into a mine in Yunnan province in China, and they got exposed to this particular sequence that we're talking about. And the difference was with them is that this wasn't transmissible. This impacted them in the way that a set of circumstances that's pretty hard to replicate without an injection. They breathed in that sequence, but they also had a mix of that sequence with high levels of bat guano, and which from a mine that also had very, very high levels of fungal spores, and ultimately it triggered that biological system that we just spoke about, giving this weird pneumonia, but it would have never been transmissible. It only becomes transmissible with the gain of function that was added to it, because it would not have impacted those miners in the same way, with the ability to actually get into the using the ACE2 receptor and being able to replicate.
Wow, very insightful. I'm going to pause for a moment for a quick station ID. And, of course, this is the Progressive Radio Network, prn.live. Text your friends as we speak. Tell them to listen in. This is the Bassline Health Freedom radio program, and I want to invite you to an incredible event that's coming up Friday, June 26th. Normally we do the 528 frequency jams on Sunday, but this next one is going to be on a Friday, and we have as a special guest Dr. Leonard Horowitz, the leading exponent of the 528 concept, and he is the author of 528, the Key of Love and Prosperity. He's the one who introduced me to this phenomenal new understanding of how to tune our instruments. So we've been doing this jam for over a year, but now we have this very special event that Dr. Horowitz is going to be in New York City to join us for a keynote address, and it's going to be 6 p.m. So you can hustle over to Rock Mill Fitness after work, or whatever your itinerary happens to be. Please save this date. It is Friday, June 26th, 6 p.m. at Rock Mill Fitness, which is 274 Lenox Avenue, just south of 124th Street in Harlem. And I'm going to quickly go over the different ways you can support this program. Of course, this program is an affiliate of Frontier Farm, and they are the leading distributor of chlorine dioxide products. And they will provide you with a discount if you make use of that discount code, which is the Bassline, capital THE, capital BASSLINE, and Frontier Farm is FRONTIERPHARM.com. So that's frontierfarm.com, and the discount code is the Bassline, capital T and capital B with a space in between. Also, if you haven't checked it out yet, I strongly encourage you to check out privateiptvaccess.com. privateiptvaccess.com. You have sports from all around the world. You have news from all around the world. You have television from any country in the world. You can watch Palestinian television. You can watch television from Libya, from Ukraine, from anywhere in the world. So it's an incredible deal, and the discount code there is capital J, capital H, OSEA, J Hosea, capital J, capital H, OSEA at privateiptvaccess.com. Please subscribe to my Substack. I'm about to publish a new article in the next 24 to 48 hours, jeremiahhosea.substack.com. Please check out my music at jeremiahhosea.com. Please buy the theme song of this show for $1. Love's the Highest Truth. And of course, I'm a chess teacher. I'm the founder of RemoteLearningChess.com. So if you don't know the game, let's fix that. I will teach you from scratch. If you've played a little bit but never really got into chess theory, let me introduce you to some chess theory, some opening principles, some middle game tactical ideas, some end game techniques, and it is truly a magnificent game. And we're in a golden age of chess right now. I don't know how many people realize that, but what's happening in professional chess is just absolutely thrilling. And of course, this is a community radio station where we have a lively and astute PRN listening audience that I would love for you to join the conversation. If you're available, if you can pick up the phone and you have a question or a comment, please call 888-874-4888, 888-874-4888. Our guest today is the Honorable Dr. Braun, and we'd love to hear from you. So having said all of that, would you like us to try to call you back on that other number, Dr. Braun?
Yeah, I think that's good. Let's give that a try.
Okay, let's give it a try. I'm going to send this over to the engineer right now, so just bear with us for just a moment.
Sure.
And we'll get Dr. Braun right back on the line. But in the meantime, I want to say the 528 frequency jams, they've been so much fun, and it's a really special event that we have Dr. Horowitz joining us. So please, if you could, save that date. Please plan on being there every month, I should say, where we've done the 528 jams. I've had the pleasure of meeting PRN listeners, and there's always 1, 2, or 3 PRN listeners there. But I was really hoping that we'd have like a PRN party. Let's get some listeners there. Let's have 10 listeners. Actually, let's have 10 listeners who each bring 3 friends to the event. Let's make an outing out of this. I'd really love to meet you, and we really want to take advantage of the opportunity to meet in real time in this digital world that we've created. It's so important for people to meet in person, to shake hands, to talk face to face. And Dr. Horowitz is absolutely phenomenal. He's a prolific author and incredibly insightful about so many different topics. So please join us. That is, again, June 26th, which is a Friday, 6 p.m. at Rockmill Fitness. But we have Dr. Braun on the line again, and we actually have a caller. The wonderful Kiki from Brooklyn is on the line. Kiki, do you have a comment or a question for Dr. Braun?
Yes, thank you for taking my phone. Okay, I'd like to say, first of all, the doctor's exactitude and precision in explaining the mechanisms is awesome. I appreciate that. I don't like people who flub and just make unsubstantiated claims. So I'm impressed with that. I'd like him to clear something up for me, however. My contention is no one is born an expert. You learn things and then you build on that learning till you get to a point of knowing something or thinking you're knowing something anyway. However, I think it's very important that we go to the basic truth of a thing. And for the last 6 years during the whole pandemic, people have been saying, and I have called in about this before, but no one wants to rectify it, that there was no disease called COVID. In fact, in the beginning of the whole charade, it was just called coronavirus. And it was not called COVID because COVID does not stand for a virus or a disease. It stands for Certificate of Vaccination Identification. At some place it was transferred, but I can't see experts, quote unquote, relating to calling it a COVID disease or illness because it's only referred to the identification period. The other thing, I'd like him to expound on that. And the other thing that this really distresses me, as people declare this enigma to be a virus. All you have to do is look it up in the dictionary, medical or Merriam-Webster. A virus cannot exist outside the body. It exists through the translation through the molecular structure within. It can't exist, so it can't be a virus. So when they compound the lie, that makes people think they can't touch a plate or a toilet or this, that, and the other. When a virus, there's no such thing as an outside virus. It can't exist. It's a structure. It's an isome. It's a structure. It's not a thing. So somebody that has a voice needs to be telling the truth so people won't be thinking that they're going to catch something that does not exist. Okay, I leave it to the doctor, and I do appreciate his commentary.
Thank you, Kiki.
I'll be still.
Any comments on that, Dr. Braun?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of things that she said that are very relevant. One is the fact that I don't actually believe that there'd be a pandemic at all if it wasn't for the COVID vaccines. The interesting thing about this is that because the world there was sort of the research was dictated about what mainstream people could get funding for, what wouldn't end their career, what they're allowed to look at. It's very much like a criminal investigation where the police department has been told don't solve the crime ever. And in a similar way, from a scientific discovery point of view, it's the same here. So there's so many unanswered questions that if there was mainstream scientists with grants and with access to information, they could easily all be answered. So one of which is that we don't actually know what happened with certainty from 2019 onwards. There is definitely a possibility that there was a vaccine strain of influenza that was circulating around the world that was actually at very high lethality. I recently came across another document supporting that, where the original samples that were taken from people from Wuhan, there was a very nasty strain of H7N9 that has the ability to create very similar blood issues. The hemagglutinin part of H7H9 is actually very similar to venom, to certain venoms, and it's able to create that coagulation. And so this all could have started with the flu that they said disappeared, and that they weren't looking for anymore, because what they would have found is that the world in 2019 and 2020 was heavily impacted by a vaccine-derived H7N9, and they would have had to admit that. And so flu completely, as a lot of people know, flu just completely went away, and they said there was just no flu, right? Which makes no sense for 2020. So a lot of people have that are in the long COVID category, that think that they were impacted by this novel virus, as Kiki quite well, she articulated something really well, that does not exist on its own. And without it being injected, it would have never been able to create sequences that are basically bundled in packages called exosomes and shed as a toxin from various bodily secretions. And where I disagree with Kiki is that within the right set of circumstances, all toxins can impact the terrain of the human body if they are successfully preserved as a sequence. And one of the ways to do that would be in the lipid nanoparticle. Another way to do that would be the body has the ability to make exosomes, bubbles that protect that toxin from being chaperoned out of the body. The other way is that if they are in feces, if they are in urine, if they land up binding because of their molecular charges, if they land up binding to particulate just generally like dust, and especially fungal spores. Viruses are misunderstood because that's all they are. They are. It's a set of code. It's software, and that software means nothing until the software is read. So if I carry around an envelope, and in that envelope I have the recipe for a muffin. If I arrive somewhere and I hand it to somebody and they don't have all the ingredients and the ability to make the muffin, that sequence is going to mean absolutely nothing. If that sequence on the way to being delivered comes out of the envelope and is shredded, and I hand the piece of paper to somebody in a shredded way, it's going to be very difficult, even if I take it to a bakery, unless they put all those pieces back together, they're not making a muffin. And so that's all viruses are. And the other thing that I hope to have an impact in the science around virology is that for people that always look at the world from the side of evil, that's all they see. But if you look at the world as functional, and if you look at the world through the eyes of an optimist, at any given moment, we've got the most perfect set of circumstances coming together. And so viruses are actually sequences that have allowed everything to survive on this planet. There would be no living forms at all. Viruses are the messages that allow for things to evolve, for information to be passed on. No human being, for example, would be alive without the viral system that actually allows for things like immune tolerance in a pregnant woman, because the foreign protein of the sperm and also the foreign protein of DNA of a growing fetus and embryo would be essentially degraded and killed by the human body, by the female's human body, if it wasn't tagged as safe. And it's tagged as safe through what we would call a virus. But that doesn't make sense if you only think about viruses, pathogens, and not functional. And the other thing that Kiki said was that something I disagree with is that I know people said that COVID-19 has something to do with the vaccine ID. I come from a background where pre-pandemic, the work that I was doing exclusively was counterterrorism and threat assessment and threat management. And so when you are abbreviating things, specifically in CIA language, if you're going to use the word cover, you can abbreviate that to COV. And if you're going to create a cover identity for something that is 19, then you've got COVID-19. And the cover identity is that the kill switch that is from the sequence, it's owned by Moderna, NIH, and DOD. That kill switch that they put out into the world, both in an injectable form and then unfortunately transmissible through exosomes, is a ultimate control and kill switch, and it relies on 19 nucleotides strung together, and it is part of what's known as the MSH3 gene repair system. When that sequence is read one way, it repairs DNA and misfolding proteins. When it's read the other way, it actually destroys DNA, and in the process, it will also cause misfolding proteins or prion. And so ultimately, by inserting a non-human sequence into the human microbiome, and specifically what's known as the microbiome, which is fungi, you can ultimately then have something that's going to sound to maybe your audience as realistic, but to most human beings on this planet will sound like complete science fiction. But you're able to toggle that switch on and off using frequency. Now, in the future, there's obviously, if this exists, the frequency that they would be doing is 1 terahertz, and there's no scientific literature or anything that possibly would be classified material from the DoD that would say that they've actually got equipment that can do 1 terahertz, and that would toggle. That would go directly to that switch. It would essentially be like a laser, like pointing a laser pointer at a light switch and getting just the lights on one particular circuit to switch on. But if they have that technology, which they may have, that's the most direct way that you can toggle that switch. But a electromagnetic pulse will also toggle the 19 nucleotide sequence, but the disease it would create isn't an instant kill. It's oxidative stress, and it would essentially cause the diseases that we now see that people are suffering from, based on the 19 nucleotide sequence creating misfolded proteins, which are deadly, and also going and basically creating accelerated dying, because instead of the DNA being given an opportunity to repair, that DNA is instructed to dismantle. So I hope that covered some of what Kiki had said. She's right on point, and I'm hoping some of that added some information. I do think that one day we will be aware of exactly what was taking place in 2019 and 2020. But so far I found, including myself, no one that is completely certain about how much was driven by some other form of disease-making process, a biological weapon, 5G, or even just a vaccine strain of influenza that ultimately was highly lethal. The other side to Kiki's point is that a novel virus didn't have to circulate at all, and 5G didn't have to do any damage, or even a vaccine strain of influenza. You can create increased mortality by lockdowns, by medical negligence and medical malfeasance in terms of literally the protocols. And everyone knows about the remdesivir, and they talk about the other drugs that are palliative care. But a lot of people don't know that a very large order for propofol was put in as part of the emergency use, and propofol, in my opinion, was used as part of that pathway that eventually got people to be on ventilators. When you've got people that are on propofol, that's what killed Michael Jackson. When you've got people on propofol, you have very high risk of respiratory distress. And then if you're not moving them around, and if you've got elderly and very morbidly obese people, and you've got them on propofol, it's not going to be long before you have to have them on a ventilator. And if you add remdesivir into that, and you collapse their kidneys, now you've definitely got somebody that's got a very high risk of death.
Incredible detail there. Thank you, Dr. Braun. We're nearing the end of the program, and of course, we don't want to be all doom and gloom here. We are capable people. We have brains. We have to try to make good decisions in the real world, and we have to try to fix some of these problems as well as we can, and to protect ourselves and our families. What would be some words of advice that you would give to a conscientious citizen who's trying to navigate in this lethal environment? What can people do to start sort of taking charge of their health, and as well as maybe their intellectual self-empowerment?
I think a key factor with this, and I'm covered this. I'm bringing out a book next month. It will in July. The book is called Surplus, and in it, I pay particular attention to the fact that disease and bioweapons in particular, and I don't just mean the bioweapons that human beings make, but all biological systems have a way of creating biological weapons for survivability, and all of them rely on something that makes the weapon binary. The lethality and the effectiveness of a biological weapon is driven by fear. Those two things have to run in combination. So what's interesting is a lot of people say, how come the people that have done this to the world, how come the people that would have, just as much risk to be exposed to spike protein from shedding or the vaccines, how come they don't seem to be as impacted in terms of, the people that were the architects or the people that pushed for this the most? And part of it is that they understand exactly what's going on. Then their fear is minimal. Their greatest fear would be an uprising of the public or the information getting out. They're certainly not worried about a novel virus that didn't exist. I also know that there were a lot of people that said that they took the vaccine and didn't, and that includes obviously leaders and includes people that were excluded from it. But there were also a lot of people that just plain out lied, and that's also part of why they don't have the fear aspect that drives this. And fear, in my opinion, is eliminated through empowerment. Fear is a source of motivation. Fear should be used as a tool. It should never paralyze. It should never take us into a place of hopelessness. What it should do is fear should create the energy that's needed to seek solution. I have a protocol called Rewilding. That's at rewilding.live, REWILDING.LIVE. I have a product called Copperine, and that's COPPERINE.com. And Copperine is a nasal spray that is a copper. It's actually the world's first copper zinc nasal spray. It also has myrrh. It also has ultimately rutin and quercetin, and all of these have really good benefits for health. In terms of sticking to the rules specifically that the FCC looks for. Unfortunately, I cannot go into claims that I'd want to, and I cannot even begin to explain all the mechanisms that I'd want to. But what I can tell people is that I have not been afraid at all of whether there was or wasn't a novel virus circulating. I certainly didn't take the vaccine. And so I haven't had fear. And also I've been using myself and my family and my 2 young kids, both Copperine, mostly for my family, and then obviously I was able to then offer that to the world. So that's one of the things that reduces my fear, and not just of SARS-CoV-2, but essentially anything that they throw on us. Copper and zinc are wonderfully antimicrobial. And the other thing that I would say to people in terms of eliminating fear is to be proactive. We need to, Jeremiah, I know that this is something that you're really good at and reinforce all the time. We don't solve problems alone. Even Copperine, I work with an incredible chemical engineer by the name of Dr. Jim Laddie. And so it's in collaboration that we find our strength. It's in community. And what I want to encourage people is that we really need to align ourselves with those that are awake, those who are participating in their own survival, because we're at a crucial moment on the clock. And the work that I was doing before the pandemic was teaching people how to survive an active attack, what people would call an active shooter. And in active attack, one of the primary things that we teach is, one, don't run back for your belongings. So, I think it's time to reflect on the things that are the most important to people. The other thing is to offer help and assistance to those that want it, but don't waste valuable time on people that don't want the help or refuse to leave a building. Or don't believe that something is happening. So one of the things that happens in an active shooter type event is people hear gunfire and they dismiss it. There's that new meme that's floating around of that reporter recently that was hearing gunfire and said, "What is that?" And that's a very typical response. And so while people are actually watching depopulation in real time, they're watching people flee the country to their bunkers or to their islands that they bought. These are all signs that this is actually real and happening, and that we have moved from a live exercise, which was the pandemic, into the accelerated period. And the depopulation that I'm predicting is happening, that will happen, will actually only start in around 2030.
Wow.
And so we actually have that useful time between now and then, where this is really like preparing for a storm. And anybody that's ever had survived a hurricane, anybody that's ever gone through a time period where the lights have gone out, it's the lead time that you have of preparedness and the lack of fear that you have in building your preparedness that ultimately dictates the survivability.
Right.
And the other thing is that
You know what, Dr. Braun, I hate to cut you off, but we are out of time. I can't run into the next
program.
program.
That's perfect, because the last thing I just wanted to tell people is God bless and thank you, and Jeremiah, thank you
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Braun. It's been a great conversation. Please subscribe to Dr. Tau Braun. That's TAUBRAUN on Substack. Please find him on X. And we're going to be reviewing this conversation tonight on X on our End All Tyranny space. So please look for me at Earth Driver on X, and we're going to continue this conversation on the Bassline Extra tonight, 9 p.m. on X. So please join us. Thank you again, Dr. Braun. Everyone have a great rest of your day, and hopefully you can join us tonight. And peace and love, everyone. Take care.